in today's world, or owners first go and hire salespeople, then realize that they're not good at it, and then think about bringing in the sales leader instead of doing it the top-down way by first thinking about a sales leader and doing it fractionally, setting up the systems and the playbooks and the messaging and all of it, and then bringing in the talent will be much more quickly successful than otherwise.
Hi, everybody. I am Dave Elsner with another sales skills workshop. We've got a really exciting topic today, and that's fractional sales leadership. Who's most likely to buy it, and why do people buy it is the main subject. As you know, I've been doing this for about 7 years now, and Henning Schwinum and I met a couple of years ago because he runs a fractional sales leadership organization called Vendux. He is the co-founder and managing partner. And I know I can answer the why first. They get a lot more expertise for a lot less money when they hire me. And I think things get done a hell of a lot quicker. But let's start with your thoughts on who's the people that are most eligible.
Well, thank you, Dave. Thank you for having me on the show. And I think that's the key question. The who are the prospects for this? And most definitely, in my opinion, we can exclude the Fortune 1000 and maybe even the Fortune 5000 companies for two reasons. A, they are too big. They have too many salespeople for a fractional sales leader to be effective. And on the other hand, they also are too arrogant to even admit that they need outside help, like folks like you and me. So to me, bringing in a sales leader at a time when sales are founder-led, and the fractional executive we bring is the first real professional sales leader that they have. And to me, that's the ideal target. And those are companies anywhere in the 0 to maybe $30 million revenue range. Once you have 6 or 7 salespeople on your team, you're too big for a fractional engagement. You really should have a full-time sales leader that leads, coaches, manages that sales team.
Yeah, and I think that's what I've found in my experience. We've got CEOs that hire and start to run their sales teams, and they really don't know a lot about sales. They may love their product and their value proposition, but they don't understand the blocking and tackling fundamentals, activity measurements, performance expectations, all the tools, people, and process that's necessary. And then there's another category, and that's like you lose your sales leader and you need a stopgap, right?
That's another, obviously another place for an assignment. In my observation, it's not quite as common or as common an occurrence. At a sales leader, there is already a strong team in place that can, quote unquote, survive a period without leadership. Might not be ideal, but they can. But where it happens, the benefit, obviously, of bringing in a fractional is that they are almost immediately available. We place people within a matter of a week for the entire process. And most of that time isn't time we spend, but rather time the client spends on interviewing and vetting the executive that we bring to the table.
Yeah. And I think the third scenario that I see a lot of is a startup where you have a founder, co-founder, and they think they need to launch sales to get their, product or solution into the marketplace. And so they bring a fractional in to build that from the ground up. I've had 2 or 3 of those experiences. Those are actually the most fun. The ones where they've already hired salespeople, you got some fixing to do.
And those, yes, to me, it's the difference between a bottom-up and a top-down approach. The third example you brought is the top-down approach, and it's the smarter way because you basically end up with a green field and can build things in the right order and build them correctly first time around, as opposed to the bottom up when you come in, when the founder has built a team, has somehow managed to have some form of tech stack, some form of messaging, some form of process, some elements of a playbook in place. But in most cases that I've seen, it needs fixing. It needs very serious fixing, all the way to the sales reps that are in place, because there wasn't a professional involved when they got hired. There wasn't a professional involved when they were trained and coached. So a founder may have built a sales team of 3, 4, 5 reps, and they each have their own messaging. They each built their own collateral. They each have their own targeting. There is no structure. There is no rhyme or reason. And that's not a scalable, as you know, not a scalable scenario, because that's what it's all about. You can run a lifestyle business that way, but if you want to scale, if you want to go from 5 to 20 salespeople, from 5 million to 50 million in revenue, you need real structure and a real process.
Yeah. I call it the blocking and tackling stuff. Like I said, activity, performance expectations, rules of engagement, territories or areas of focus. There's so many foundational things you need to build in the beginning to create long-term success. And then also the, advice on the proper tools that are working in the marketplace. I recently got engaged with a company that was product-led strategy. They were the best. And so sales came in for 10 years. Well, now they need to start going outbound, and they don't have the proper search tools, cadence tools, the things that the sales team's going to need. And so I'm sure you see that as well.
Yeah, building an outbound sales motion as opposed to having some form of marketing and inbound inquiries it's a whole different ballgame. And the good news for me is that in a lot of conversations with founders or owners, they come and understand that it's different, that they are missing big pieces of what it takes to be successful in an outbound sales motion. And that's why they bring people like you in to help them do that, because you have the experience, you've done this before. And that's to me, the key criteria that makes a fractional executive successful. It's the fact that you've done this before. It's not something that you come up with on the fly. It's not something that you develop as you're on the assignment, but rather you've done this several times before. You know the motions you have to go through. You know the elements you have to look at, put them together in a playbook to really make a team successful.
Yeah. I guess an interesting observation is that, founders and CEOs have overly optimistic expectations of a sales team ramping. They expect them to be producing within 2, 3, 4 months of launching a new outbound strategy. And while that's feasible, it's not immediately feasible without the right tools, people, and process in place.
Correct. We put a blog post out this week where we asked the question, do they put the same kind of expectations down for HR or for their engineering team or for their CFO? I mean, do you expect the company culture to change within 2 months just because you hired a new head of HR, or your product to fundamentally improve just because you brought in a new head of engineering? And the answer in all these cases is obviously no. Only when you talk about sales do they have this almost instant expectation for success and for change, and that it's an investment that pays for itself right from the beginning. And the word investment already indicates that you have to put in some money first, because some work has to be done in order to then reap the benefits. So sales is still an investment like any other function in the company.
Yeah, like simple things like an onboarding process. What do the first 90 days look like, and what skills am I going to teach them? How are they going to learn the product and the messaging, and all of that needs to be in place. And so one other thought I have is that when I go into a gig like this, my job is to work myself out of a job as soon as possible. It's not to like stay there for years as a fractional. It's to get them all set up, get the tools, people, and process, and become that bridge gap between when they start sales and when they're actually ready for a sales leader.
Yeah, it's definitely the ultimate goal. You work yourself out of a job because at some point the company has grown to a point where they need a full-time sales leader. And that can take different forms. We've done some placements where the company is so small and the market they're addressing is so small that they might not need a full-time sales leader for several years. And so at this point, we have one client where we've had a fractional in place now for 2.5 years. And we think it'll continue for at least another year and a half, 2 years maybe, before they're big enough, if ever, to have a full-time sales leader.
Right.
And there are other scenarios, and I would put that top-down approach you mentioned earlier into that category where you bring in a fractional, you front-load the assignment because the fractional does all the foundational work, right? The playbook, bring in the right staff, but then you can ramp down their activities. And you could even get to a point where you've built a team, they've executed that very successful playbook, and eventually one of the sales reps can take over and become that sales leader. Or it's a very straight line where the fractional comes in, sales scale, and at some point when the number of salespeople has grown to 6, 7, they need a full-time sales leader, and now it's time to exit.
Yeah, and that's actually what's happening with one of my current engagements. They took their top sales rep, made him the sales director. Yeah. Now it's about me mentoring that sales director with all the teachings, and I don't know how much longer the engagement's going to last, but it's when that person becomes effective, and they can take the reins and run.
We've had one assignment where the fractional sales leader was there for 3 months, and then it turned into a coaching advisory deal for another 1.5 years.
Yes.
So you can take all forms and shapes and sizes, and that's good. And that's the value. That's one of the reasons why founders and owners should embrace the fractional model, because you can adjust it far more easier, far more dynamic than you can with full-time employees.
Right. I think the top benefit is more bang for your buck and a quicker, speedier time because of the expertise and experience that I bring. I also, see that sales leaders, the average tenure is less than 2 years. And so, if you get into this cycle of hiring a bad leader and then hiring another bad leader, it's kind of a death spiral. But what other benefits would you tell the audience?
Well, just one comment on the tenure.
Yeah.
Statistics that I've seen are anywhere between 12 and 18 months. And you're absolutely right. At that point, we are in the realm of fractional engagements already from a timeline perspective. So you may as well save yourself the time for a 6-month executive recruiting process and go fractional right away, and not worry about bringing somebody in that's a culture fit that will still be great 5 years down the road, when statistically speaking, that person won't be around after 2 years.
Right.
So other reasons beyond what you've mentioned is, for me, it starts with the question, do you need the function full time? And in most smaller companies, the answer is no, right, because if you begin to fractionalize the work and ask the question, how much of that strategic sales leadership skill do I need? It takes a pretty sizable company for that to be 100%.
Right.
And if companies hire full-time before then, it ends up being a player coach. It ends up being someone that wears multiple hats, that is multitasking, that is doing things they're not really good at. Because as humans, we tend to be hopefully good at one thing, but we rarely are good at several things equally or do several things equally well. And you're a player coach in sales, that's about the worst role you can have, because what do you focus on? Your own quota and selling your own clients, or helping others to be successful? And you'll never balance that in the right order. So fractionalizing work allows you to right size the skills that you need. And it also allows you to bring in the right skills that are necessary at different times. When you hire somebody, you often don't think about just the things that you want them to do in the first 3 months, but
right.
rather the way your company grows, and will that person still be a good fit 2, 4, 5 years down the road? And first of all, it's hard to predict what the business will look like in 5 years, but it's even harder to find people that you think will be a good fit and that are so versatile and so much not a specialist in something that's the only role you can put them in. A fractional executive is a specialist. You bring them in for one specific topic, and that's what they're good at. And if that topic is taken care of, aka the business has grown, then they exit. And if at that point you need somebody different, you bring somebody different in, because it takes, different skills to go from 0 to 1 million, from 1 to 5, from 5 to 20, different skill sets. So don't try to find one person that can cover that entire journey, but rather break it into pieces, fractionalize it, and then bring people in for each step of that journey.
That's really good. Really good. So we've talked about the who, why, what, and when. How about the how? How do I get started if I'm thinking about a fractional leader?
I think every founder or owner knows someone that's in sales. I would find it hard to believe that somebody says, I don't know a single VP of sales or a single chief revenue officer. So they all know somebody.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's often the go-to person for them. And the question is really, is that the best possible person? And what qualifies this person beyond the fact that you know them personally? And so for me, the starting point is to really document, write down what you want this person to accomplish, not in 5 years, but in 3 and 6 and maybe 9 months. In that window, that's a typical fractional assignment. What do you want them to accomplish? What skills are required to do this successfully? What past experience will make somebody successful in that role? And don't talk about rock star, team player, A performer, or any other of those labels, because no one labels themselves mediocre. Everybody is an A player. So think of the tangible criteria, like past experiences, industries, verticals. Think about the decision makers that this person is selling to, or this person's team will end up selling to. What type of sale is it? What type of deal structure? Is it a $500 widget that's being sold online, or is it $1 million custom software installations, or anything in between? Very different sales scenarios. And when you have all of that as a checklist,
Right.
Then look for somebody who checks all these boxes. Don't compromise. Look for somebody that checks all these boxes. And if you know somebody who does, great. If you don't, there are places out there, including Vendux, where you can find them.
Awesome. Yeah, I've always focused on technology. That's where my experience is technology sales. If somebody from medical or insurance, something outside of my industry, I'm not the right expert for that. I know how to grow technology companies. And that's what I think is great about your network, is that you've got access to people and experience in various industries, from product-led strategies to outbound sales strategies and everything in between. So that's the impressive part of Vendux.
Thank you. I appreciate, Dave, you saying that. And what you're describing is your superpower, right? Tech sales. That's exactly what all the fractional executives need to do. They need to identify their superpower, the things that they're really good at, not because they think so, but because others have validated that, and also the things that they want to do going forward. Because after a 20 or 30-year career, you've done a lot of different things. Some of the things you may not want to ever do again. So identify the things you're good at and the things you want and do going forward. That's your superpower, and that will help you as an executive to find a gig. And if you're a business owner looking for a tech sales guy, they got you right here. If it's any other skills, they can come to Vendux and we'll do an assessment to see if we have somebody that checks all their boxes that they have put up for their project.
Excellent. Loved this conversation. I think people are a lot more informed about what this fractional sales leadership is all about, how they can benefit more quickly, and I think. And so any final thoughts from you, and we'll shut it down?
I think we've shared everything there is to share, the how, the why, and all the other questions about fractional sales leadership. Thank you, Dave, for having me on the show.
You're welcome. How can people reach you?
I think the easiest way is to come to our website, vendux.org. That's the way that they can find me and can find us.
Yep, and I know you're very visible on LinkedIn as well, which is where most of my community is. So with that, thank you, everybody, for watching. Great conversation, and we will see you next time.